Hi, this is Denise Mathew, and welcome to the 4th episode of The Energy of Emotion, where we dive deeper into the emotionally defined solar plexus and discover all the secrets that it has to tell. In the last episode, we talked about the 3 types of emotional waves of the solar plexus and how they have different themes. Today we'll talk about the channel 4037, how it feels to have the complete channel, and also how it feels to have hanging gates. With that said, let's get started and discover a little more about the energy of emotion. Before we get started, I just want to talk about a few things that we talked about in the last episode that might be important to review. The first is that there are 3 different types of emotional waves, and how they can be experienced is quite different by those who carry the energy. And of those 3 different types of emotional waves, we have 3 tribal waves, 2 collective waves, and 2 individual waves. Since our focus is going to be tribal waves today, here's a quick refresher on exactly what a tribal wave and tribal energy really is. So when we talk about tribal energy, we're talking about family, or who you consider to be your family. It could be biological connections, or also connections that are made with individuals who feel a lot like you. They might like what you like, believe what you believe, and in some way they feel as if they're your people. Tribal energy comes in many different forms, from parent-child, close partnerships, and relationships, but the one thing that's in common is that there's always some sense of bonding. Tribal energy is the type of energy that allows humanity to continue on. There's energy for sex, reproduction, nurturing, feeding, defense, and even war. It's my people against your people, and in that way can be powerful and sometimes out of control. The question with tribal energy can be, what am I willing to do for the people I love? Adding emotional energy to the equation can be the catalyst that takes people to the extreme of how far they'll push the limits and the lengths they'll go to protect their tribe. The 4037 is made up of the gate 40 and the gate 37, the channel that connects the will center and the emotional center. So when you have this channel defined, you automatically have a defined will. The energy of the 4037 can talk about business, resources, sales, deals, and agreements of every kind. Because there's willpower and an emotional connection, there can be emotion connected to any kind of agreement that people with this energy make. When you have a defined will, it usually comes with some level of ambition, and that remains true for the channel 4037. Since it's tribal energy, there's always going to be some level of the decisions that they make and the agreements that they make being good for the whole energy of the family and not just for the individual. In some ways, the channel 4037 sounds a lot like the channel 1949, but the difference between the two is that the 1949 can be about courtship and commitment, and the channel 4037 is all about the contracts and agreements that come after the courtship. In other words, the quid pro quo deals. Although it's not as common today, in the past, this energy of the 4037 might have shown up where families agreed to marry their children. Some level of dowry is exchanged between the two families. These marriages were done to strengthen the community and were very tribal in nature. We've already talked about the energy being good for deals and agreements, but on a very practical level, it can be also great for marriage or what people consider to be marriage or committed relationships. When the energy of the 4037 channel plays in relationships, there's usually expectations of what your significant other will do to maintain the bond and relationship. Since all channels coming from the solar plexus are emotional in nature, the trick with this energy is when couples are making deals or agreements that they're spoken aloud and everyone is on board with the expectations. Because oddly, people who carry this energy, or even if they're in the aura of someone with this energy, can have a tendency to have expectations of a partner without verbalizing them. It's almost as if they feel that their thoughts are already spoken aloud when in fact they're just thoughts. So when a partner doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, even if it actually hasn't been verbalized, disagreements can ensue. When you're in a relationship with someone who carries the energy of the 4037, or if you carry it yourself, there's a deep need for clear communication as well as keeping promises or agreements that you made. The easiest way to alienate somebody is to go back on a promise or agreement, because when this happens, there's potential for the relationship to break down. And because the energy of the 4037 is all about keeping commitments, it can be devastating when a couple gets divorced, there's some kind of infidelity, or there's a loss of a partner through death, because the energy of the 4037 just doesn't like to come apart. Now, if we're talking about this energy in real life, we could see the devastation that was caused when the marriage breakup of Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher happened. Only recently, Demi Moore wrote a book detailing the devastation that she felt after their breakup. Now, if we look at their charts, we see that Demi Moore has a 40-37 defined, and Ashton Kutcher has an open solar plexus. An open center of any kind amplifies the energy that it takes in, because the energy in an open center is inconsistent and dependent on the people around you. What that would mean for a human design perspective is that Ashton Kutcher would be taking in the energy, the emotional energy from Demi Moore and amplifying it. You'd have two people in the marriage who are deeply committed and have this agreement and these ideas of what a marriage is supposed to look like. So based on what Demi Moore said and that Ashton was cheating on her, I don't know if this is true or not, but that's what she said. So if that were the case, then when he got out of the aura of her 40-37, there was potential that he didn't have that connection or that deep need or bond between the two of them any longer, and was able to break the agreements of their relationship or their marriage. And after they broke up, Demi Moore said she was in a deep depression and she had a lot of issues and a devastating time trying to cope with the fact that they had broken up. So this all makes sense, and it all works for the energy of the 40-37, which is, it's deeply disturbing and upsetting when it comes apart. And there are a lot of agreements and expectations within the marriage of what's going to happen. So we can see that the person in the aura of the energy can be affected, as well as the person who having the channel defined for themselves. And one more thing is that Demi Moore also has a 1949 defined, which is even more of a commitment energy. So it really does make a lot of sense what she said in her book, that she really had a hard time coping with it and getting over it. And it's taken her several years before she could actually even talk about it. Since we don't want to leave the connections on a sour note, I just want to talk about Annette Bening and Warren Beatty. Now, Warren Beatty is an older actor who was very popular in Hollywood years ago. Based on what people said, he had a lot of women and he was kind of a Casanova and he never really wanted to settle down. But when he met Annette Bening, it ended up that they got married, had children, and finally, after many, many years, and I think he was into his 50s when they did actually get married, he settled down and got married. So let's have a quick look at their charts. Now, if we look at Annette Bening's chart, we see that she has the 37-40 defined as well. It's way up in her unconscious sun and earth. So that means it would be a very powerful energy for her and a big theme in her life, because the top four numbers are all about the 70% of your life and about your life theme. What that means is that this energy would be quite powerful from her. Warren Beatty is defined emotionally as well. He's defined through the 1222, which is an individual channel. This isn't tribal. It's all about the self and creativity, and this would be considered a big wave. Having said that, although the individual wave is quite strong, the tribal energy is obviously pretty strong as well. From a human design perspective, probably played a part in the connection coming together and sticking together. Of course, the 40-37 would have been a good part of their charts coming together, or the people coming together, but there are all also other connections between their charts that probably drew them together as well. Now, if we look at the individual gates or the hanging gates when they're not a complete channel, we have the first one will be the gate 37. The gate 37 is all about peace and harmony. When someone carries this energy, they can have a sweet or tender energy that people are drawn to. And this is energy that seeks to communicate with others so that they can work together to create harmony in a peaceful environment. And family can be everything to someone who carries the energy of the 37, as well as anybody who has a complete channel. And anybody who has this energy of the 37 can thrive in a tight-knit community, as well as feeling really good when their whole family comes together. I like to show celebrities that carry this energy, and the reason why I do that is because sometimes we see more about what's happening in celebrities' lives than we do in our own neighbors' lives. So when we see things happening to these celebrities in the public view or hear about things, and we can see that they have certain gates, it's an easier way to learn the information about the gates and have it in a concrete form so that you can kind of remember it and understand it. Now, if we continue on talking about the gate 37, we're talking about somebody who carries energy, who is naturally tactile and very demonstrative. That can be almost instinctive. This doesn't always have to be the case, but there's a good chance. People who carry this energy can have a sense of tradition, and they might like to have people over at their home and be very welcoming and great hosts. But as much as they like to welcome people into their homes, if they've been deceived or wronged, it's pretty easy for them to close the door on people and have people just locked out of their lives. So for someone who carries this energy, it's important that they're clear and upfront with what kind of agreements and what they want from people. Otherwise, they may believe and expect someone to follow through on an agreement and believe that they've articulated, but maybe they haven't. So because of that, the other person isn't going to follow through because the other person actually doesn't know what's being expected of them. So clear communications, like I've mentioned before, is really important as well with the 37 as it is with the whole channel. Another part of when you carry the gate 37 is that there's an approachable and friendly manner. And when it's hanging, there's a real need to have peace because that's the theme of the energy. But because there is no willpower, because there's no full channel of 4037, people who have the gate 37, if they feel that there's some disruption or difficulty in a relationship, might have a tendency just to leave the relationship rather than fight through it because they just don't have the energy to have disruption, because living in a peaceful, happy environment is most important to them. When someone has a gate 40 hanging, they generally need alone time since it's considered one of the alone gates. And that can be true of the full channel as well, this need for aloneness. But as much as they need alone time, they can sometimes struggle with loneliness. Richard Rudd likens the loneliness of the gate 40 as a sense of uncomfortable loneliness and isolation that comes when people hide away, so much that they get out of their path or out of the flow of their life. And this is where they can have a difficulty accepting help from others, and this concept of going alone gets overwhelming, and this is when they start to really feel a strong sense of being alone and loneliness. And just to clarify, Richard Rudd talks about gene keys, so he would be talking about the gene key 40 rather than the gate 40. But having said that, there's a definite connection between the gates and also the gene keys, because Richard Rudd was a colleague of Ra Uru, the founder of Human Design. Now, when we talk about the loneliness of the gate 40, that's a loneliness that can force somebody with this energy out to socialize and to bring their energy to their tribe. Interestingly enough, the natural state of the gate 40 can be very much like the line 4 of a profile, which is called the opportunist energy, where there's a drive to connect with others, but then there's also this drive to be alone. So there can be a sense of wanting to be alone because no one gets them, but then they have an urge to go out with others because they feel they need to. And once they get out, they usually connect and then they want to be alone again. When you have this gate, you can have the endurance to get through the loneliness and also the endurance to be with others. It's important to try not to make promises or to will your way through life because you don't have a defined will through the 4037, it can lead to stomach issues and sometimes even ulcers. And if somebody holds on to the past and things that people have done wrong to them too long, that can affect their stomach and their health as well. This can be the case whenever anybody has an undefined will. The energy of the gate 40 can be all about the drive to bring new and innovative ideas to the tribe, but it's also to release past hurts. And another thing about the energy of the gate 40 is that sometimes it tricks people into believing that people don't care about them. And usually this is the furthest thing from the truth, because you might have a lot of people around you that actually love you, but you don't necessarily see it in that perspective. And one thing that's super important about somebody with the gate 40 or anybody who has the alone gates, it's about this whole idea that being alone is less about want and more about need. That alone time allows people with the energy to recharge their batteries and be ready to go out into the world again. So that's all I have for today, and please be sure to tune in next time when we'll talk about the 59.6 tribal wave and how it shows up as a channel, as well as how it will look when you have hanging gates. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.